Hi everyone, in this video I'm sewing a men's button shirt using this pattern, McCall's M6044. This pattern is a little bit older and I've had it in my pattern drawer for a while, but I did confirm that there are still a few places to get it online, and since it's a classic men's button-up shirt, it's really not going to go out of style, so you should be able to use it over and over again. I don't always make a fitting sample for every pattern, especially if it's something casual or oversized, but for this project, I decided to sew a muslin first. I really wanted to get the fit just right so I can use this pattern to make shirts for work or other special occasions. I don't want the final version to look sloppy. Plus, making the muslin was good to understand the construction before cutting into my real fabric. You might notice I'm not in my usual sewing room today. That's because I spent the weekend visiting my mom and grandma. I cut out my pattern pieces ahead of time and brought them along for a little weekend sewing project. My mom does a lot of sewing and quilting, so she already had everything I needed. It's actually been a while since I've made a button-up shirt, so sewing this muslin was a great refresher. I skipped the collar for now since I was mainly focused on checking the fit through the torso. Overall, the fit wasn't bad, but the shoulder seam sat a little too far off my shoulder, and the sleeves were just a bit too long. To fix that, I took 1 inch off the outer shoulder on both the front and back pieces, then re-blended the armhole using a French curve. I also noticed some extra fabric in the back, so I added double-pointed darts, borrowed from another pattern, to take out the excess and shape the back a bit better. After I was happy with the fit, it was time to move on to my real fabrics. As far as materials go, the main fabric I'm going to be using is this bold print that I have here. It's 100% cotton quilting fabric that I got at Joann off the clearance rack before they went out of business. It should sew up really easily. Some of the downsides would be that since it's quilting fabric, it probably is going to wrinkle badly when I wash it, so I'm probably going to have to press this shirt every time. Now this fabric here, this remnant, I pulled this out of my stash, which is also a quilting fabric. I'm going to use this for the inside of the cuffs, the inside button band, and the inside of the collar stand, just to give it a little pop of something interesting. For thread, I'm using some Gutermann all-purpose dark gray thread. I debated using a color for all the top stitching, but I think the fabric choices I have are already pretty bold, so I'm not going to need to use colored thread. I'm also using this Shapeflex Pellon SF101 interfacing. I recently started using this and I really like this for making clothing because unlike the other type of interfacing that's kind of fibrous, this one is more like fabric, so it just looks a lot nicer on your finished garment, and I would definitely recommend this. Finally, for my buttons, I'm using the simple black 2-hole buttons. The stripes in my main fabric made it really easy to lay out my pieces, and since there were no cross-grain stripes, I don't have to worry too much about things matching up going around the body, like on the side seams. Something new that I'm going to try out on this project is using my Cricut Easy Press to fuse my interfacing to my pieces. And using a regular iron is just fine, but I find that it takes a while to get it all fused because the plate is so small, and obviously this heat plate is a lot larger surface area. So I asked ChatGPT for some instructions on how to do it. It says I need to set my heat at 300 degrees for 15 seconds and use a press cloth. So let's try it out and see how it goes. It doesn't seem like that was quite enough to fuse the interfacing really well. So I'm going to bump up the temperature to 315 and bump the time up to about 20 seconds, and we'll see if that makes a difference. Final verdict on using the Easy Press for fusing interfacing. It doesn't work that well. I ended up going back to my regular steam iron. It took a little bit longer because of the smaller surface area of the heat, but it seems like the steam is really critical to getting a good fuse to your fabric. The instructions for this pattern have you interface just one side of the cuffs and the collar, and for some time now when I've made shirts, I've always interfaced both sides of it. I think you get a better result that way because those areas of the shirt are going to undergo a lot of manipulation during the sewing and wearing of the shirt. So I like to interface all my cuff and collar pieces, but I don't know how common that is. Let me know in the comments below which you do and your reason why. One of my all-time favorite sewing tools is wash away seam tape, especially for sewing patch pockets on the front of shirts, because it gets all the pins out of your way and lets you get that pocket perfectly placed before you take it to the sewing machine to stitch right around the edge. One new thing I tried on this project was using this triangle-shaped reinforcing stitch on the pocket edges. I think I like it, and I'll plan to use this stitch again. I decided to use welt seams for most of the seams. Welt seams are not quite as nice as flat felled seams like you'd find on a high-quality button shirt, but they are easier to do and still have a commercial look. First, I stitched the seams right sides facing and pressed them open. Next, I trimmed down one seam allowance and pressed the wider seam allowance over the more narrow one. On the longer overlapping seam allowance, I used my serger to finish the edge. Finally, from the outside of the shirt, I ran 2 rows of top stitching to secure the seam allowance down flat. One right next to the seam line, about 1 needle width away, and another one about 1/4 inch from the first line of stitching. For top stitching, I think it looks best if you use a 3.0 stitch length, just a little bit longer than your standard 2.5. I really like how good top stitching makes your sewing look really professional. Even though I've been sewing for some time, I tend to have a really hard time getting the curves on the cuffs stitched perfectly. I think it really helps to draw in the line with a friction erasable pen so I know exactly where the needle needs to go. So no shame if you have to do the same. I also think it helps to turn the stitch length down a little, maybe to a 2 or 1.5. Right, I'm getting near completion on this shirt. I've got the button band and the cuffs attached, but I haven't closed them up yet. Still open here. Now, the instructions with this pattern tell you to slip stitch the cuffs and the collar and the button band closed, and that's one way to do it. You can just go ahead and close these up by machine, but I found that it's really difficult to get this perfectly stitched doing it by machine only, so I am going to take my time and slip stitch it closed by hand first, and then go back and top stitch it, and that will make sure I get this really done perfectly. So let's pin this up, and now with all the pins closing up the button bands and the cuffs, we're ready to go do some relaxing hand sewing by slip stitching in both sides of the fold here. It's really hard to screw this stitch up. I think having the right pressing tools is essential for making a great shirt. One of my favorites is this Dritz wood pressing tool. It's perfect for pressing open seams inside the collar. Honestly, I don't think I've ever used it for anything other than shirt making. If you use it for other projects, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your ideas. And just a quick reminder, I've linked some of the supplies featured in this video down in the description. They're Amazon affiliate links, which means I earn a small commission at no extra cost to you to help support the channel. Thanks in advance for checking them out. I really like how this shirt turned out. It's definitely unique and something that no one else has. Although I have sewn button shirts before, I'd have to say this one is probably the best so far because of the time I spent on the small details like perfect top stitching and the contrast colors inside. My key takeaway from this project is that good sewing is all in the prep work, the time spent on fitting, picking out the perfect fabrics, and doing good pressing that are equally or maybe even more important than the time spent at the machine. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll like and subscribe and drop a comment below on what you'd like to see me make next. That's all for this one. Happy sewing!